Hello, everybody. This is the Do More Optimism podcast. I'm Ioan, and I'm a new host. So this is my first time actually interviewing people for the podcast. So let's see how it goes. Yeah, Ashley and Jason invited me to be a guest because we organized some fun events at our farm, some Do More Optimism camps. So that's kind of how what I'm doing is relevant to this. And I'm also working on some community projects in Portland. And so this conversation is going to be about intentional community and conviviality in all kinds of forms. So the guests today are Alex and Paul. And yeah, I've met Alex on Twitter, and we exchanged some conversations about our community, and I've followed Paul for since last year. I feel like he always posts very sweet and wise things on Twitter. And so I want to, so let's see can you introduce yourselves and like I'd like to know a bit about your story and what brought you here, and both the doom part and the optimism part. And I always enjoy finding out more about people's backgrounds when I hear them on the podcast. So Alex, do you want to go first?
Sure, sounds good. That was a great intro. Um, I am a writer. I write a Substack called Things That Should Exist, about intentional communities, belonging, interdependence, um, and come from a tech Web3 background. Before that, video production background. I lived at a Sufi retreat center for a year. And yeah, just really interested in this idea of communal living. Right now, I'm outside of Austin, living at a place called Neighborhood Zero. It's a DAO cabin, has a thing out there, which with like some tiny houses. So yeah, I don't know. I kind of just feel like I'm a student of um, co-living in intentional communities, and I'm looking for like my forever intentional community, or maybe that's just some land that some friends can come live on to when they feel like it. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you. And what about the doom and the optimism? Like, what makes you
Oh
feel
man,
doomy and what makes you feel optimistic?
so much feels doomy. Yeah, just I would say it's like an 80-20 thing for me. A lot of the time. I think I tend towards the doomy. Maybe like having clinical depression for a long time has kind of like biased me that way. The optimism part, I think, is the doom, the shared feeling of doom is kind of pushing people to uh take more risks, and but also kind of soften. I don't know, I just feel like I'm sensing in like with all of the people that I meet, like people are start like opening up in a new way to like all these kind of ideas of collective, uh not just living, but like organizing, and just, I don't want to say grassroots approaches to solving these problems, but it's almost like peer to peer, person to person, or like in small groups
Mhm.
that people are. Um, so yeah, that's kind of fuzzy, but that's kind of my optimism. Is I'm just in the
Mhm.
people that I meet from day to day, I feel like people are kind of just giving each other more slack interpersonally, and they're more interested in doing things collectively. I feel like there's like a sea change, cultural sea change that's happening. Um,
Right.
yeah,
Let's hope for that.
yeah.
And how about you, Paul? What is your story?
Okay, well, I would say that I am a member of an unintentional intentional community. The the idea of living in community with a bunch of people just always seemed so beautiful to me, and I always yearned and longed for it, and never happened and never happened. And then my wife and I and our newborn baby moved in with her parents on a big acreage out here in Western Canada. And I kept on yearning for intentional community for years and years. And then I realized, wait a second, we've built this thing around us. This is what intentional community actually looks like. And so here we are living that lifestyle and reaping the fruits of it. And it's not easy, but it's beautiful. And I think that's kind of the theme of my sort of interest in doomer optimism, is this idea that life could be hard, but beautiful at the same time. And maybe sometimes even beautiful in the difficulty. Not that we want hard things to happen, but when they do happen, they do have a way of clarifying what matters to us. You know, I had a uncle who passed away recently, and it was hard for us all, but we had this beautiful funeral and life celebration on the weekend. And it's, I don't know, like it never should have happened, not as early as he went, but I can't deny how much wonderful stuff came out of it anyway. And that's kind of my hope for the future for all of us, is that we can learn to receive what's beautiful despite and because of the hardship that we might be facing.
That's beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah. And I just thinking if there's anything else to mention. I work at a weird software company right now. We're kind of building tools for communities to kind of own the means of community building. It's a open source project called Holochain. And I actually encountered that through looking for some convivial tools, some sort of software to help our community garden manage its operations, and didn't find that, but found something much more weird and interesting. So maybe I'll talk about that. Not quite sure.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Holochain. What is there anything else you want to share about like your background or how you ended up doing what you're doing, or your interest in both the techie part and the non-techie things?
Yeah, you want to go first, Alex?
I think Alex did already. It was just you,
yeah.
I guess, Paul. Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right then. Broad question. I think I've always been interested in things like permaculture design, and especially what they call invisible structures or social permaculture. It's just always seemed really appealing to me to think about like creating good, wonderful communities around us. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of interest in local currencies and community gardening and stuff like that. So when I found this group of people who are building this software that worked kind of like permaculture, only for computers, I thought, well, this is kind of interesting. And it seems to be attracting a lot of the people who are also interested in community building, social permaculture, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I really liked what you said about finding the beauty in the pain, or rather than despite the pain. And I think that's sort of a theme about communities in general, or trying to be in community, because there's always going to be conflict, and it's always going to be painful to some extent, because we learn by being with other people, and we find our boundaries and find our wounds and in relationship with other people. So I think that's a good thing to talk about. So I don't know who wants to go deeper on that, about how you find your gift, maybe in the wounds, or in the wounds that get exposed in relationships and communities, intentional or unintentional, and how to navigate that.
I feel like all of us are carrying some heaviness here, like the three of us specifically. I'm sure there's lots that we could talk about in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I feel like there's it's maybe a wound that drives people to like seek collective living, to participate in collective living. Like for me, I think it's like not feeling as connected to like my family of origin. Um, and I grew up with like a really, like my dad's side is a really large extended family. Like he has 5 brothers and sisters. I think I have like 15 cousins, first cousins, and now they all have kids, you know? So, like when my grandma turned 90, there was like almost 100 people there.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, I think as time goes on and as like my grandparents have passed away, I've just seen extended, the cohesion of the extended family kind of crumble a little bit. And I think just even like in my immediate family, just it's hard. People have difference of opinions and different ways of relating that aren't, you know, always healthy. And so I think that's what drives me towards like wanting to start or join a homestead, or kind of being in this phase where I'm visiting and trying these different kind of co-living places out. Like I'm going back to New York City and I'm checking out this place called Utopia, which I don't know too much about, but I'm talking to them next week. And yeah, just I don't know. I know there's no utopia, you know, but I think yeah, the beauty in it, in the going into the pain part, is like I want to be with a group of people who are committed to like just the hard dispute resolution, working through the shadow stuff. Ioan, I remember like listening to that on the PNW crew episode, and that really still resonates with me. So yeah, I guess I'm just looking to meet more people like that, and to visit more places that have those principles and that ethos and culture. But yeah, I'm interested to hear what you guys say or have to say about this topic.
Me. Sounds like you are looking for some people to reciprocally commit with you, Alex. Like that sounds like a kind of an important part of your story. Like knowing that this is going to be hard, to not be scared of the things that you're going to face, but like to face them together, I guess. You'll have that sort of, okay, I know I'm going to bring my 100%, and I'm hoping that you guys will also bring your 100%. Is that sort of true?
Yeah, or I'm hoping to discover a group of people who already have those beliefs more or less, and to become a part of that community, or to just over decades just slowly build these relationships, and eventually, it's like this kind of solar system and we're kind of orbiting together. Some people live there part-time, or this is just a vision I have for a collective land project, but I also, maybe I'm orbiting between a bunch of different land projects, I don't know. I think I just like the idea of living collectively, living communally, living on land. So yeah, I'm interested because you guys are both doing that. I almost like, I was thinking about this podcast and I was like which way, Western man, it's like Paul or Ioan, like, like either become the benevolent dictator of a land project, or maybe I start a family, and that, and maybe both, maybe neither, but I just had that kind of thought.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something deep in there, this yearning for being with other people in a way that feels meaningful, and where you can be vulnerable and be your whole self, and not have to hide parts of yourself in order to belong or to fit in. And that goes, I think, for the relationship with the land as well, not just with the people, like developing a relationship with the land where you are, where you can see the land and the land can see you, and have reciprocity with the land, with the neighborhood, with the people, with the animals. That's for me a sort of a ongoing inquiry of what that looks like, how to be in that sort of relationship or reciprocity. But I don't know that much about it, other than it's difficult. And I mean, I've bumped into things that are painful, so I know kind of what mistakes I've made, but I don't think there's like solutions for this kind of thing. So what do you think, Paul? What has worked for you, or what have you discovered in your intentional?
Yeah, what has worked for me? I want to bookmark that, talking about the land thing, and come back to that.
Yeah.
Maybe that sounds like an interesting thing to explore. But I don't know, for a long time I wanted some sort of solution, sort of strategy that could be applied, some sort of principle. And I kept looking for, like, what is that magic formula that if we all abide by, things will just work? And I'm sure that there probably are some sort of magic formulae, like, I don't know, probably intention setting, like when you come into this community, we expect this sort of reciprocal relationship, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But I've also heard of that not always working too. You know, I think we can come into these relationships thinking that that's what we're doing. Like, oh yeah, I believe in that. Like, I'm totally committed to this. And then I get into it and I'm like, holy cow, this is not what I expected. This is actual work. I want to point back to marriage for me. Like, that was the journey of marriage. I thought, oh my goodness, I gotta be here today, and I've got to be here tomorrow, and I've got to be here the day after that. And right now we're not on good terms, and I don't know why, and I don't know how to get to the other side. I want to, but I don't know, like, what is the conflict, and how do we address it, and do we feel like we're on the same page? All these questions puts me into a real sort of nebulous, I don't know where we're heading sort of state. And I think the only thing that really, well, two things actually. What I was going to say was, the only thing that really helped me was just that commitment to be here today, no matter what the uncertainties are, and to be here tomorrow and the day after. I'm just going to keep on being here. And the other thing that really helped me was discovering that my wife was doing the same thing, and in fact was much more comfortable being present and being committed than I was. You know, I had some issues. My parents divorced when I was young, and so, like, I always felt like something was going to crumble. And so I was always waiting for that moment when things are going to crumble between me and my wife. And even though things have felt rocky sometimes, they have not crumbled, and I don't see them crumbling in the future, because I trust that she's just committed to me through the uncertainty. And that was a hard thing to get used to, but a really comforting thing at the same time, because it means I don't have to get things perfect right now. I don't have to complete my journey looking at my shadow side. It can, bits of shadow can still be there tomorrow. She's got her own too, you know. And so I don't know, again, I'm looking for solutions, but I don't know how to scale that out to a community level. Like, how do you marry your land mates or roommates or
Mhm.
whatever without marrying them, and recognizing that this is not the same sort of relationship. Alex, you were talking about
Mhm.
exploring things like where people move through like a network of
Mhm.
communities, or you stay for a while and you don't,
Mhm.
and then you move on to other things, and have that be also something that's natural and healthy. Like how do you marry a community for right now? And I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on what that might look like, given that it's partly just walking the walk. Yeah, I'm super curious.
Mm. That's beautiful, Paul. Thank you. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, gosh, yeah, there's so much good stuff in what you said, Paul. I like the idea of like, it's like three men here talking about like domesticity and like, just like, I feel like there's like, it's like typically a gendered thing, historically. But in our, when we talked before, recording this podcast, we talked about like doing the dishes. Um, yeah, like, who's it? Nora Bateson. Um, but yeah, I'm really interested in, yeah, what commitments, I guess, maybe you guys make or renew on a daily basis to like being in relationship to the people in your life that you live with, your communities. That's something that I would really like to learn about, just generally, and like start to form better versions of my own commitments. Like, I would say my own commitments are just like wherever I am, just try to be kind, just really simple, common sense stuff of just like golden rule type of stuff, and helping people, and kind of Boy Scout style, like make this area better than you found it, leave this area better than you found it. But I'm curious, yeah, like if there are commitments that you guys have. I was really interested, Ioan, like, and like this idea of like reciprocities, and like how do you how do you engender them, how do you feed them, how do you initiate them? Is that like a useful framework for thinking about building and deepening relationships and building like communal relationships?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel the reciprocity is something I feel more deeply in a relationship with the land. Like I've learned from studying with David Abram and other people to think of offering something when I go into the woods and I pick up a mushroom, I'd make an offering in exchange, or when I make an offering to the trees, or Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about that and braiding sweetgrass. So just an acknowledgement of the sort of incredible beauty and abundance that's all around me when I go in the woods or in the pasture or by the creek. And an acknowledgement that there's living sentient beings that are sentient and have agency in a different way than me, that are inhabiting the place, and that I trying to be open to and understand how to, and like learn how to listen to and see, and let them see me. So I feel that sense of commitment to the land now that I've moved at least part-time on the farm, and it feels yeah, it feels like a multi-generational thing. It feels like it's going to take a long time for the relationship to unfold or something. The other thing that came to me as far as relationships with other people, there's sort of, for me, it's curiosity and openness, and so that's what makes relationship work for me, is being curious about the other people, and yeah, and the sort of a deep sense that they're not me, you know, they're different than me, and that's amazing and fascinating, that I get to interact with the like other points of view, that it's not, things out there are not just a reflection of me, or it's not about how it impacts me or how it makes me look or something. So there's like an inexhaustible variety of how to be as a human in the world or in the land. So the fun part is to have sort of try to be in a space where everybody has as much autonomy and agency as they want or need, because then they can get to be closer to their full self, or their whatever their gift is, and something that's juicy and creative for them. So yeah, that's it's sort of in that way a community, in the way I've sort of experimented with it. It's very different from a marriage, in the sense that there's actually a lot of autonomy and a lot of space for people to do their own thing, and then to choose when and how they do things in common, in a group. At least that's how we do it at the farm, and everybody kind of has their own place. And we decide when we have dinner together, or when we do a project together. And I think that helps, because people have that choice, and they're not forced to be, there's no expectation to be with each other all the time, or some or like a physical restriction of being with each other all the time and sharing space all the time.
Yeah, I feel like there's so much there that I want to ask and talk about, switch it around and interview the interviewer.
Go for
That
it.
that idea of, you talked about offerings, and Robin Wall Kimmerer talks about that too, like the idea of like encoding our relationship to the land or to other people in some sort of ritual or ceremony, or feeling a responsibility. I feel like it's kind of offensive to the Western modern rationalist mind. Like, well, no, can you please explain it to me in terms of like how that benefits me and stuff like that? Like I feel like that's where the sort of vestiges of rationalism in me want to take that. And so I don't want to like test your words against the the gauge of rationalism, but what I want to find some way of reconciling the two, and like saying that sort of feeling of responsibility, even though it's like an appeal to the emotions or some sort of weird instincts that we've cultivated, like why that matters. And can you tell maybe what that does for you, or why it feels so important to you to have rituals or some sort of feeling of responsibility or commitment to the land?
Thank you. I mean, I have to acknowledge I don't always do it. I mean, I can also be mindlessly walking through the woods and being caught in my head, or listening to a podcast instead of paying attention to what's going around me. So, or listening to my own thoughts. But it just feels better. It feels like a richer experience if I'm like, if I'm acting as if, or trying to act as if there are like sentient, agentic beings around me, even though I might not understand how they do that, how they are that way. It's just it's a more interesting, it's a more beautiful world, something how as Charles Einstein would say that way. It's it's kind of a leap of of something. I don't know if it's faith, a leap of imagination, you know. Eh, yeah, like and one time I was going with my daughter and her boyfriend, looking for mushrooms, and we weren't finding any. And then I like remembered, oh, we have to do an offering, and then we did an offering. And then we started finding plenty of mushrooms, you know. And it's like, yeah, this is fun. You know, and our offering can be like a breath, or like spit, or like liquid, or you know, or like because we, you know, our breath is feeding the trees literally, because they eat the CO2. So to me, that feels like, it feels actually in the realm of the rational. And I learned that from David Abram, who wrote a book called Becoming Animal and Spell of the Sensuous. And he talks about how it's not supernatural, it's just supernatural. It's like there's when I talk and there's words that come out of my mouth, the shape of my words are impacting the waves in the air, which are being felt, and the leaves are moved in a certain way by that, and they pick up something from my words. And there's ways of, and this is just how the universe works, how the beings communicate with each other through air and water and various electrical impulses. So it's not something mystical, it's just really a natural thing, just how natural processes work. Actually, it reminds me that a friend sent me an article last night, and somebody is a French artist and scientist who did an experiment where they listened to the soil. They set up some ceramic things that would actually pick up the sound from the soil, and they saw how like a richer soil had a different sound, more diverse sound than a degraded soil. So yeah, that's kind of the way I would go. Just rediscovering our senses that used to be richer because we used to have to survive based on our sensations, not based on our like being in boxes and having things that protect us from the wild. So there's something that we all have in our bones or DNA, the ability to be embedded in a rich, sensuous world, full of like mysteries and yeah.
That's interesting, the idea that it could all just be natural, not supernatural. And even like I struggle with these appeals to, like you said, it feels better, and the word that keeps coming to my mind is it just feels right, you know, which sounds like it's some appeal to some moral absolute, and maybe it is, and maybe in some cases that's okay to have these sorts of absolutes. Perhaps if you want to get rationalistic about it, it is all just heuristics that keep us alive, and they're just all adaptive traits. But I don't know, in order to like live into them more deeply, it doesn't really seem to work to pick it apart in that way. Just live into it deeply, and that's where we discover the potency of these sorts of ways of living, of thinking about responsibility and commitment and reciprocity and beauty. Yeah, I love how you said beauty, like opening yourself up to the beauty in the other. I found that was a big turning point for me, was when I stopped trying to understand a person and get what they are completely and have them all figured out, but to just let myself be wrong about that, you know, to discover new things about them all the time. It was such a relief, you know, to go, oh, this is a new thing about you that I didn't realize, especially when I hated the person in the first place. And then I found out, oh, you know what, they go home after being grumpy with me and they take care of their aging mother or something like that. Isn't that beautiful? I love being wrong about that person. And yeah, just that gracious gracious approach to other people is so liberating for yourself and obviously for the other person too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious. I'm curious how to be more curious about people, you know, and just to hold more ambiguity and like tension in my own, letting go of my own judgments of people. I think it's I feel like I have knowledge of these concepts and maybe understand it a little bit, but you know, I don't sometimes it's so hard to practice it, you know. And what we're talking about right now makes me think of embodiment, and it almost seems like there's this kind of embodiment renaissance happening right now. Like my partner is a somatic therapist, and I just see on social media people talking about embodiment, somatic therapy, and I almost probably somebody who's researched this more could you know point to some research and stuff, but it's almost like rationalization has kind of severed or has really created the mind body like dichotomy when they're really like one and the same. But I think the Western tendency to rationalize, it's so easy to just create this kind of palace of rationalizations but kind of ignore what you're feeling in your own body. And I think that might be one of the greatest parts of like nature and like situating yourself in this web of life, you know, like these agentic beings, is like reconnecting to your own it sounds like David Abrams stuff to a T of what I've read, like really deeply reconnecting to your own felt sense. But yeah, I guess my question for you both is just like, how do you I don't know, I feel like a very critical person, so how do you and maybe you feel this on some level too, but how do you like Paul, like you were saying, like how do you fight your own notion that like, oh, I've got this person figured out? How do you hold space to like know that you don't know everything about a person and keep a sense of expansiveness for the relationship to develop, even though you're like, you might be like, I hate this person and they just irritate me so much, and like I don't want to be around them. But in any community, there's always going to be people like that, right? So, and it seems healthier to me to hold that tension and try to stay open and try and just let trust build over time. So yeah, I don't know, how do you guys do that?
Well, it might surprise you to know that I don't always do it well, actually. I know it's a shocker, but maybe there's a bit of I don't know, opportunity to be kind to myself there. And so my question for you, knowing what I'm like, is like, what sort of standards do you hold yourself to? I found that a lot of my criticality of other people came from how critical I was to myself. And it sounds cliche, but maybe that's one of those cliches that deserve to exist. Because I think part of what drove my critical nature was just like, well, I'm holding myself to these standards. Why are you not? Like, why is there this sort of disconnect here? And I don't think that like it just follows like A, be nice to yourself, B, you'll be nice to other people. Like I think you also learn to be nice to yourself by giving grace to other people. But so they're obviously in relationship. I wish that I could remember all the details of this journey. Partly because it's a struggle, because part of the softening of myself involved letting go of having to figure everything out. Like, okay, what did I do and how did that happen? And what was the strategy that I can, you know, retell to other people so that they can help out, they can help themselves. And I don't remember all of that, unfortunately, but I do remember a couple of things. And that was, yeah, being kinder to myself allowed me to have grace for other people. I've got a Catholic heritage, so there's a lot of guilt, a lot of condemnation, a lot of moral absolutes. So releasing those people from that burden that they're carrying of eternal damnation just felt really good. Like, oh, now I can just love you. That's nice. And you know, still people piss me off, and I'm sure I piss a lot of people off too, but it does feel like a first step to learn to be kind to myself and to release other people from having to be perfect. And I don't know how you do that in practice. I think it goes back to that every day I'm going to show up and do it wrong and do it right. And tomorrow I'm going to do a little bit more right. The day after that, I'm going to do it not so right. And to be okay with that, you know, like to obviously take responsibility for the times that I fail, but also to go, okay, I am in process. It helps to have kids too, because they'll teach you that real quick. And that is a lesson that I wish that I would be learning quicker. But yeah, to go, okay, you aren't perfectly formed little people who have a perfect sense of right or wrong. You're figuring this stuff out and you're making tons of mistakes. And wishing that I had that grace given to me in a greater measure when I was a kid. I think motivates me to give that grace to my kids. I'm not doing wonderfully at that. At least I don't feel like I'm giving as much to my kids as I really want to, but yeah, that's helping.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
Ioan, I feel like you've been walking this road for longer than I have. You've got adult kids. I'm curious.
I do.
Yeah, what sort of, yeah.
I mean, I also feel like I've learned a lot from being with kids, more than anything, I think. And also, I'm still not doing it right, and I still make a lot of mistakes. Now I'm enjoying my kids being very articulate and pointing out my mistakes, and it's awesome. And like, oh, I wish I could have been as aware and present when I was that age as my kids are now. And that feels good. Like, like something's evolved, or something's like I wasn't as able to talk about my feelings, or to ask for what I needed, or to even know that I could do that, or they don't have to just feel guilty and hide or something. So I'm enjoying that. But yeah. Maybe there's something similar between a kid, especially a baby, and some creature in the woods that you can't totally understand the language of, you know, or a tree. And there's more unknown and magic somehow there. Until everything gets collapsed through words and things that we think we know the meanings of, you know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I hate to be
how old are how old is your kid, Paul, or your kids?
Well, they're all younger than middle school. I'll say that. Just because I've been doxxed before, so I won't go into detail.
No, I didn't. Yeah.
Got three kids.
They're not babies anymore. Yeah.
No, yeah, they're all school age.
Yeah.
But Yeah. Oh, yeah. Lost that train of thought. There's something
Yeah.
great in what you're saying there about kids who can't speak to you in whatever language. Oh, that's what it was. Yeah. I don't want to be a pro-natalist shill here, but yeah, having kids is the fast track to being a better person. It just points out all the things I'm doing wrong, because it matters all of a sudden. I've got this commitment to these little humans that I called into existence. And so, yeah, I've got to figure out my shit. So here I am trying to figure it out and doing a bad job and hopefully doing a better job every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The word,
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just the word that keeps coming back to me is grace. Grace for myself, grace for other people. And you're asking how we live that out. And I don't have any great answers, but it feels like every day I'm going to remind myself about grace. And I don't know why it should be such a difficult thing for us, especially to have grace for ourselves, because it should feel wonderful to let yourself off easy, but we resist it so much. And I don't know why. That could be a subject of an entire podcast series in itself.
Yeah. It seems like a process. I think your conscious mind, you can be like, yeah, okay, I'm okay with this. But then there can be some sort of burbling in your unconscious where it's still like a sloshy, sea, and it's a lot more resistant, maybe, and it just based on life experiences and all kinds of things. It's fascinating. You're right, Paul. I think, yeah, it could be a podcast episode in and of itself. There's something I feel like that we're like dancing around between like care and the pain that comes with caring for other people and caring for your environment, and grace. But then I also have this question for you both. I don't know how these reconcile, but I just want to ask my question that's kind of been kind of in the back of my head for a second, of just like, this is actually, I think, a good segue. How do you think of like mentorship and eldership and being a part of a community? I mean, I keep noting like the similarities between us, but I also think I might be the youngest one here. I'm 37. But I'm starting to feel, like they say like 35 is when middle age begins, but I've always wanted to give of myself, and I'm kind of excited about getting older to be, to help kind of be a mentor, or maybe I'll be a father someday. But I'm curious, like, what y'all's experiences and thoughts on that are, on basically just on eldership and within your own, closer social groups and families, and then like on a communal level.
First of all, I just want to say it's so beautiful to hear you say that you want to give of yourself that way. Yeah, I think that it's so important. I think the first thing that like being in the company of elders shows us is that, hey, this walk, it's hard, but it's possible. Like, look at these people who have been married for 50 years, or look at this person who has been like working at the soup kitchen, and the stories that they have been able to collect over the years and stuff like that. This journey it's not inevitable that this journey is going to end in ruin. People have done it before. I can probably figure it out too, especially if they tell the stories about like how they were crap at this walk of life when they started out. That's so empowering, just because you can see that there is progress to be made. They bring that sort of growth mindset to it. Yeah, one of the things when I was scared about my marriage dissolving every single day was just seeing my wife's parents and how they're just together, and there's nothing really spectacular about that. They're just here today, here tomorrow. They like each other. They enjoy going on trips, and it just showed me that it was actually possible, which was I couldn't actually believe that until I saw it. So yeah, I think that that's one thing that we lose when we aren't in the company of people who have done this already. What about you, Ioan? Have you had like mentors that have helped you in this walk? I feel like a lot of us are orphans.
You feel like a lot of us are orphans? Yeah, in some way. I feel like more recently I've had sort of the chance to learn from people that I can feel like they're mentors. But I do miss having sort of an ongoing, long-term, frequent relationship interactions with people who are elders, and I don't feel I have that, and yeah, and I'm looking forward to somehow manifesting that, or finding those people, both at the in our neighborhood, at the farm. There are people who I want to learn from, who are there, and I haven't reached out to them enough to invite them or try to establish a relationship. And there's hopefully in Portland, there's also people who play that role in the community I'm trying to start. Yeah, I feel there's a wound there based on like me growing up, and when I was growing up, I feel like I couldn't look up to the people who were around me. Like I couldn't look up, or at least at my level of awareness there, like to my parents or to other people that I was exposed to. So in that way, I felt somewhat homeless from that relationship with a mentor or teacher or someone that I could look up to sort of unconditionally, or like, or just accept. And so yeah, that's really kind of present for me now, and I'm finding that I can have mentors who are like younger than me right now, that I can learn from and look up to also. And I think the best, the way I'm finding that now is by trying to do something very difficult, where there's a lot of difficult problems to solve and conflicts, and then I can only survive through it through appealing and asking for help from these people who are willing to be the elders, whatever their age might be.
Wow, that takes courage to put yourself into places where you feel incompetent, to kind of let yourself be incompetent. That's like one of the scariest things for men.
I think it's very liberating to model, to sort of also model, and for other people, acknowledging that I'm clueless and incompetent in very clear, specific ways, while I'm also like casually sort of accepting something, that there may be something that I can hold as space or experience that may be valuable, very lightly. Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. Like, I think that gives other people permission to do the same thing. Like when they see somebody who they feel is like way more capable than themselves asking for help, like, yeah, that's pretty powerful. And if I may embarrass you on a public broadcast, I was talking to a colleague of mine who met Ioan, And the vibe that he got off of him was settled wisdom. And so I suspect that you're probably being a mentor to people in ways that you're not even aware of, just by your presence in the room or your presence on the farm and stuff like that. Yeah, that's just my hunch.
Thank
Okay,
you.
embarrassment over.
Yeah. No, I'm taking it in and I'm appreciating it. Yeah. Yeah, I do. I'm sort of leaning into that. There's something sort of cozy and settled, and like that I can sort of expand the feel of coziness around me, so people can feel comfortable in themselves. Yeah, so that's how I'm going for.
That's great. The world needs that. Alex, I want to ask questions. I don't know if they're like too sensitive because they have come from struggles that I know you have had, but like, do you like, can you point to like the consequences of immature, unformed leadership and like what effect that has when those are the sorts of mentors that a community has?
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
I guess I can only really speak to, I mean, the retreat center that I lived at. Yeah, it was such a shame. I think it was such a beautiful, it's been such a transformative place for probably thousands or tens of thousands of people. Like, the place was open, I think, from 1980 to 2022. And so just countless spiritual retreats, and they had a true blue Sufi mystic, Pir Vilayat, living there up until the early 2000s, I believe. At one point there were like 200 people living in these old Shaker buildings, and they almost had their own industrial economy, with like an auto shop and a bakery, and just retreats. I kind of came at the tail end, and yeah, the great irony was, the board of this place was run by, senior age Sufis, who had been practicing for years and years. Yeah, it was just so tragically and traumatically dysfunctional. And I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around why, yeah, it's just the age old human stuff of people kind of wanting to preserve things either as they are, or preserving their reputation or their authority. I think it was like a mix of all these things. And I don't know, I feel like on a long enough timeline, most intentional communities or retreat centers just wind down and end. And maybe that's what they're supposed to do. Maybe they kind of come, they have a big bang, and then there's entropy and they fall apart. I was reading starting to read this really interesting book. There's this guy, Ron Rivers, who wrote a book called Self-Actualization in the Age of Crisis. And he's also like tech adjacent. He was on Kevin Iwaki's Green Pill podcast, which is like, if you're into Web3 and crypto, well, Holochain, you probably know who Kevin Iwaki is, or at least like Gitcoin. But yeah, Ron was on there, and his book is really cool because it kind of situates, I'm not trying to plug his book, but I'm trying to just get to this one specific thing. He takes a lot of recent advancements in physics and like discoveries in physics and kind of posits them against like this age of crises like on Earth. And he talks about how there's research that there's not just one big bang, like, and it started from nothing, but actually like multiple universe, like there's research that says there was a big bang before the big bang, and each big bang is influenced by the one before it. So maybe just a long way to say, maybe it's part of being alive. It's part of participating in any social formation, you can never know the second order effects of like, you know, the good that something is put into the world, even if it dies. So yeah, I think I really enjoyed living at the abode. It was also kind of heartbreaking numerous times. I would say to most people, don't live at a retreat center unless you're like really into that faith. But also, this is just one guy's, you know, I'm not even a Sufi. So yeah, Paul, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk about that. I don't know if I answered your question at all, but um,
I feel like it led us down an interesting side trail. Just the fact that you're talking about entropy and renewal, maybe it's just hard to impossible to escape that and to see the decay as something, oh, I don't know. It just happens. And I think the people who want that sort of calcification to remain, well, you're gonna have a hard time ahead of you, because it's gonna just happen whether you like it or not. We see that over and over and over again. But to embrace it at the same time. And I think that that's where things get kind of weird, is if we don't embrace that sort of thing.
yeah.
Yeah. And I loved how you called attention to the good that the retreat center did in the world, even though it was dysfunctional, even though that there are some weird things going on that broke your heart. Like that maybe is what grace looks like to me. I think that we can this is especially important in community. We can kind of swallow our discomfort with certain things and let things go on for way longer than they ought to. But I think there's also sort of an acknowledging and making room for a fair amount of dysfunctionality. I don't know what the difference between letting it be there and letting it own you or the community, or and destroy things, like what the difference is and what it looks like to remove yourself from that when it's obvious that it's gotten toxic.
Yeah,
that's a great question. It seems like most communities, or the stories I've heard from people being in communities and leaving communities, is that they stay way beyond the point where the thing was obviously toxic, but there's a strong sort of unconscious thing, maybe, or the belonging thing that keeps them there beyond that point. And that's really mysterious to me, about how that can happen over and over again in so many different situations, but and yet with a very similar pattern. You know, it's usually the dude that is like somehow acts like a guru or acts some kind of authority, and people you know, either are into it or tolerate it for other reasons, or so just weird, you know.
Yeah, perhaps when somebody becomes beyond critique, that's when things have the capacity to become toxic, because there's no way of solving that problem.
Yeah,
there's no way of addressing that. And I think that's something I've heard you talk about too, Alex, is like, well, when we can't just talk about it, what is our next step? Can we do? And I think there's a crisis point there. Like, is this something I can tolerate for the good that I can see? Like, is this something that's going to destroy me, or is this just something annoying, like doing the dishes weirdly? Like, there's an obviously right way to do the dishwasher, and like, is that something I can roll with? And is there going to be richness in ignoring that annoyance, or is there something bigger? And maybe that's where you've got to ask the question of, should I leave now?
Yeah.
because I think that, yeah, there is a real, well, I think we've talked about it here, and I've heard it from countless other communities. There is a real risk of somebody taking control and it turning into a really messy thing. And I think it's when they wield a lot of control and they're beyond critique. That's when that's when the community is destined to die. Maybe I don't know if that maps to your experience, Alex.
Yeah, it totally does. Yeah. The phrase that sticks with me as like my barometer. I mean, I think in any relationship or community, you have to tolerate some dysfunction or annoyance or whatever. But I do adult children of alcoholics, and the hallmark phrase for like how a dysfunctional family operates is don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. So I always kind of bring that to any group that I'm in. I'm like, is it allowed to talk, trust, feel, how much, and it's always situational, and it's always different with every group or relationship or friendship, anything. Yeah, I find that just really useful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I don't know if you get this, but I sometimes feel the need to over talk and over express and over discuss, which drives my wife crazy because she's like, well, things are mostly okay. There's some problems here, but it's all good. And I'm like, no, our relationship is falling apart, But yeah, that's an interesting dynamic. I don't feel the need to go down that road. It's just something observed in myself.
Yeah, I relate to that. I think, oddly enough, when I drink too much coffee or caffeine, just like through the roof catastrophizing, and it must be just already there. And then if I just add the right chemicals, it's like a rocket taking off. So,
yeah, I've done that to myself too. Yeah. Anxious attachment. Lots of fun to work through.
Yeah, I have both anxious and avoidant attachment depending on the situation. So yeah. But speaking of attachment, like one, you can have secure attachment with land, or you can have secure attachment with a tree or with an animal. Like I feel the sheep are really easy. They're really sweet. They're really easy to feel like they have a secure attachment to each other, and they can welcome, humans in a secure attachment if you're around them when they're babies and they get used to you, and that's like a way to experience that. And like if I go and sit next to a tree, I don't feel judged by the tree, I feel like I can be whoever I am next to that tree or next to the creek. So yeah, I remember, I just realized when you asked the question about the mentors, like I felt like when I was a teenager, I was in high school, and there's a walnut tree outside my window in an apartment building that I had planted my father, and that gotten tall. And I felt like I had like a secure attachment relationship with that tree, and the tree was my mentor in some way because I could look at the walnut tree and see how, like, what a sort of variety of experience it can have as a tree. Like you have all these branches and you have all these leaves, they can all move independently and have this like incredible sensitivity to air and to all kind of things. Like, wow, what would it be like as a human to have so many hands and fingers and such like freedom of movement with all the different and still be secure and in one place and produce food, and it's like, that's crazy, so yeah, I think we can so that's why I guess I'm suggesting you could find secure attachment in the land where you are and carry that, or at least that's what I want to do. Find secure attachment, carry that with me, and hopefully I can be more like a tree around other people and give them that sense of relationship with the tree or with the creek, instead of sort of this flighty fight or flight, freeze fawn kind of human that is, you know, yeah, because the tree doesn't go to fawn response or flight response. Yeah.
That is
It's
such a
cool to
beautiful.
see that.
Oh, go ahead. Go
Oh,
ahead.
just
Sorry.
the print behind you, Ioan. The
Oh yeah,
tree
there's a
print that
tree.
you have
Yeah,
is
there's
really
a
Oh
cool.
tree.
yeah, look at that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's such a beautiful metaphor for growing old and gaining wisdom and
Mhm.
being capable of being a mentor. I love that so much.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, like just growing in richness and complexity. I think that's what I notice in the people I trust most, the people I think are the wisest, is they've got complexity. They've got room for complexity. They don't have answers, they have questions. I mean, they've got answers too, and some of the answers are really beautiful because they're complex. And yeah, it's interesting that you pointed out that nature can be that too. I remember
Mhm.
Robin Wall Kimmerer talking about, and a lot of First Nations people talk about this, is how the animals and plants are our elder brothers and sisters, and they're our teachers. And I thought, oh, yeah,
Mhm.
that's lovely and
Mhm.
nice. But reading her book, it gave me a sense of, oh, this matters. This is deep. These
Mhm.
these things can teach us about generosity. I remember
Mhm.
the first time I grew some basil plants, and I got tons of basil, and they didn't come in these little plastic clamshells. And I got more
Mhm.
basil, I got more basil. And then at the end of the summer, there's like thousands of seeds. And I thought,
Mhm.
am I stealing? Is this okay?
Mhm.
But I'd been so like
Mhm.
enculturated to think that everything, demands some sort of exchange here. But here,
Mhm.
nature was just being scandalously generous with me, and that taught
Exactly.
me
Yeah.
something about the
Mhm.
way the world actually works or should work.
Right.
Yeah, to be less
Mhm.
transactional. So yeah, that
Mhm.
definitely resonates with me. So be grounded in land in your community, because the land will teach you a lot about how to live together.
I think
Mhm.
so. I hope so. Yeah. That's what I'm going for. And like what you said about, I think about being relational instead of transactional. We have a relationship with the basil plants. We need to take care of it. We need to propagate the seeds, plant the seeds, and then it's not transaction. Or like, and so that's sort of, I think that's relevant in the context of intentional communities if we want to have any sort of post-capitalist different way of living each other or embedding ourselves in a wider group of people, then has to be modeled in that abundance that we see in nature. And how do we embed ourselves, or how do we manifest that same level of abundance that a a, a field that has water and sun has? um how do I do that, and with my feelings and openings and relationships with people around me have the same level of abundance in the way I interact with people? That, yeah.
Yeah. I think we talk about mentorship, and yeah, I think it's like modeling, like providing models for people. Like I think do y'all know capitalist realism, Mark Fisher? Or he was this kind of philosopher and essayist professor, and his most popular work is just like capitalism, and like the market economy has just captured people's idea of just what reality even is, and
Mm-hmm.
just shaped people's just uh, perceptual reality to like
Mm-hmm.
this transactional thing, that it's all transactional, when really,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like the natural world is the opposite. um so I feel like the answer lies in modeling it, in like all these different ways that are possible.
Mm.
The how of that, I have no idea, like what the strategy or implementation is, but yeah.
I think what you've said in conversations past, Alex, about bringing our whole selves to the relationship, I think that's like a necessary prerequisite. Makes me think of like the old covenants where God would say to the Israelites, okay, so here's what I'm going to do for you, and here's what I expect you to do for me. But if you renege on your side of the bargain, I'm still going to give you 100%. You know, like that. I don't know that that's always healthy for us without infinite resources, because like we have limitations, right? So, but I think that if we bring ourselves to our relationships that way, we may get taken advantage of. But I don't know how relationships could thrive and progress without that sort of I'm giving you 100% in this covenant sort of commitment. Yeah, don't know.
Yeah. I think eldership with eldership comes discernment is like another thing I'm just excited about getting older, is you just get better at discerning who to give something to. And you don't have to just indiscriminately give, you know, you kind of like place your bets, and that's what it seems like to me.
Yeah, good point. To have that sort of prudence to know where to put your energies, to be able to set up boundaries.
Yeah, not worrying about being taken advantage of has worked pretty well for me over time. You know, even with the caveats, it's still worth it. And
That's good.
because even with the learning experiences and issues, it still feels more open and expansive than the other way around, you know. Yeah.
So you're saying we should keep it up then?
Well, and there's no shoulds, you know. I'm just reflecting what you said. Yeah, I don't think
if we
there's any
keep it
shoulds
up
for anything. Yeah.
if we keep it up,
yeah.
I feel like that's part of the theme of like not being perfect, is being like, I'm just gonna give, and whatever you know, if I feel foolish after giving, like that's okay. I'm still gonna keep giving, you know. Maybe I'll give more even, you know.
Yeah.
And it feels like this doesn't really relate to how do you live in community, but I feel like also it's important with all this giving 100% kind of thing that we're talking about, and sticking it through sticking with it through all of the struggles and the hardships. That can take a lot out of us. And for me, it's easy to focus on the work that I need to do and totally forget about myself. But the fact is, I am a finite human being, and I need to find places to recharge. What you're saying, Ioan, about secure attachment and finding secure attachment in the land, that doesn't sound like it's about community living. But if I come to like my community situation and there's a conflict and I don't have anything left to give, well, that does have something to do with community. I haven't been taking care of myself, and so it's going to be a real challenge to present myself, you know, with any sort of wholeness or like have anything to contribute. So yeah, it's actually a pretty selfless thing to be a bit selfish and to receive.
Wow. Well, this is beautiful. I don't know if we can go any deeper or any more beautiful than what we already have. And what else? Is there anything else that's sort of floating in the air that wants to come out?
I think
in some like
I just was gonna express my gratitude thanks for hosting, Ioan. Like I feel like you were like a tree of this of a host.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mm.
Yeah, it feels like this whole podcast was about doing the inner work of community living. And I don't know if I expected it to be that. Like I thought we would talk about convivial tools and get into maybe some of the digital stuff we were talking about, but this felt really rich. And I don't think it was a system or a structure for getting community right. And I think that's kind of the point. There isn't one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for framing that, and I feels right. Yeah, I noticed there's a part of me that wants to, there's like the little trickster part that wants to say, oh, you guys are so like positive and lovey-dovey with each other, and like, where's the dark stuff? Or why are you not talking about the dark stuff? But so let's see, what would I say to that part? I feel like it's okay. I think we talked about a fair amount of issues and challenges, and we don't have to go into the sort of bottomless pit of despair every time. Yeah, it's always there. It's accessible, you know.
I'm totally.
Yeah, we can circle around it and still hold on to the tree roots, and yeah.
More
Yeah, despair
optimism
doesn't need.
than doom.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. The
Yeah.
despair doesn't need any help in manifesting itself.
Right.
We all know how to not dance. It's learning how to dance that we're all trying to do.
Yeah. And yeah, so I guess we come back to the Do More Optimism podcasted community. I feel like part of what I've been excited about and feeling and being around people who are listening to podcasts or talking about stuff, all kinds of stuff, is that you see that how people are able to accept each other despite having pretty deep differences on especially politics and other things like that. And whenever I tell people about how I'm hanging out with these Do More Optimism people, and you know, they're kind of slightly interested, but when I tell them that, hey, these people have very different political ideas and they still talk to each other, everybody's like, what? Like, that's crazy. I've never I've never heard of that thing before. Like, so that's so it's like kind of sad that that's the case, but I feel like that's part of the openness and sort of curiosity. Like, let's be curious of what lies behind this particular story or like particular identification, and find the story of the other person and the things that we can be curious about and creative about together.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like this is opening up a whole new can of worms that we don't really have time to open up. But yeah, like I feel like what's happening when we see doomer optimists getting into arguments and then having cordial chats afterwards is we're trying to learn how to be committed to the person rather than to the ideology, you know. And maybe that's why some intentional communities die young before they should close up, is because we're committed to the ideology of the intentional community rather than learning to commit ourselves to Joe and Alice and their kid who always tramples all over our flower bed, and you know, that kind of stuff. Like that's what we should be committing to. You and me and them and stuff. Yeah, that's hard work.
And I think, like, as far as the doom goes, with all the things that are gonna fall apart, that might fall apart, I think still the most hopeful thing there to imagine that despite our differences and how we trigger each other, how we disagree with each other, if we figure out how to do stuff together, that's gonna be the main technology that we need to get over whatever issues we have with energy and other problems that are gonna come out. So
yeah. We have the community of power within ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Of community of what in ourselves? Of
I meant to say we have the power within ourselves. Yeah.
yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thank you. I think we could end here. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you around next time on Twitter
Yeah.
or hopefully in person too at some point.
That would be lovely. Yeah, thank you very much. And great
Thank you.
learning about your inner worlds and how you've navigated life.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. I enjoyed it.